And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and Michael Lahanas Calderon and Robert Reich, yours truly. Heather, what's on today? What are we doing this week?
There's so much to cover. The LA fires, which are horrific, Trump, and the fact that he seems like he's already taken office. And how about the revenge of the oligarchy?
The revenge of the oligarchy. But on the fires, I tell you, all of us here in Berkeley have friends, family, associates, colleagues who are down there and or who have had to evacuate. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible. It's not just a disaster, but it strikes home. It is people's homes. There's something sacred about your home, and when your homes are under assault or gone, I mean, can you imagine?
It's so scary. It really, I feel like it's unbelievable in the true sense of that word. And I'm from Los Angeles, raised, not born there, but raised from 2 to 18, and I have so many good family and friends who are directly or indirectly affected by this. It's horrific. We have obviously the Palisades fires, but then the Easton fire, and then the Hollywood fire.
Well, it looks like they're all kind of all around LA, and they're starting to come into LA, and they're still, as of yesterday, in fact, as of this morning, still not contained.
Oh, I know. You see the percentage of containment. I haven't studied fire science. I don't know exactly what it means, but it seems grim. It seems so scary because you think it's kind of, you get through a phase, and it's so quick when it happens. I mean, that's what so many on the ground people have said.
So what's the significance here? I mean, what can we draw? What lessons can we draw from all this?
Well, first of all, the fact that I'm sure you all too, were looking online as this was happening, and the amount of disinformation and misinformation for me that I personally saw on Twitter. I mean, I saw the Hollywood sign burning.
The Hollywood sign did not burn.
I know it didn't. It was AI. But this is the kind of stuff, and just all of the kind of conspiracy theories and the negative thinking and all this stuff that is happening online and radicalizing people. And then there was such a gap for real science. I mean, the fact that when you have hurricane force winds and you have 0% humidity, I mean, non-existent humidity, and these dancing embers, right? Scorched earth, one little tiny ember will go 2 miles in a nanosecond. But no, nothing says that online. It doesn't talk about the science or the reality, everything that moves.
And it doesn't really talk about any relationship with climate change. I mean, I'm sure, climate change, it cannot be that the worst fire in Los Angeles history, and these things have happened before, but the worst in history is unrelated to climate change. It has to be that there is a climate change story there, but I haven't.
Well, this is why you should get off of X and go to your local journalism outlet, because a lot of people I saw on X, I mean, this is, there have been a number of natural disasters since the transition in ownership, if we can call it that. And the quality of, late breaking or quick breaking information about disasters has been declining ever since. And people on Twitter were saying, X were saying, I actually have really benefited from going to my local radio or listening to my local radio station, my local newspaper, or my local digital outlet, and they are on top of it.
Wait a minute, but do you mean in Omaha or in Minneapolis?
In LA.
In LA.
So you go.
But how do you go if you are in Minneapolis or Omaha? How do you find what's going on?
That's the problem.
In
That's
Los
the problem,
Angeles?
certainly.
I kept looking at the LA Times, but the problem, I mean, Twitter, we can argue about it for days, is very fast. Now, the problem is it's fast with a lot of non-truths, but it is hard to beat in terms of being able to search for a trending term, Hollywood Hills, and have a million
but
things
if it's
come
all
up.
bullshit.
I know, that's the problem.
What's the man? I'm going to confess, I actually went to TikTok.
Wow,
and
really?
I got a lot. I don't know how moderated it is. I don't know how controlled it is, but I got a lot of information.
It's not that moderated.
It isn't
controlled. No, no.
Well, and I think that it certainly speaks to the idea that people are craving that as a reliable source of information. That these local outlets are picking up the slack to some degree, and people are turning away from X. But I mean, when you go onto X, just to get back to the place that most people still look, like yourself and me, like I was looking as well, there is a lot of crap, frankly, floating around. There were
you
people.
Can say bullshit. That's perfectly fine.
Well, you'll say it for me.
Okay.
There's a lot of, spin that almost instantaneously happened on that platform. You had right-wingers saying that, this is because of DEI in the LA Fire Department, that they're not hiring.
Wait. What's the connection between DEI and the Los Angeles Fire Department? I have I mean, who could conceivably come up with that?
I mean, I think that's kind of the point. I mean, they simply took it as yet another opportunity to push their talking points, and the platform enabled that to spread very quickly and very widely, which is not what would have been the case before.
And nastiness, like, oh, the Hollywood elites deserve it, and just so much just snark and
Well, look at it. I
horrific.
mean, it is becoming a cesspool under Musk of bigotry and hate and everything else that we don't want to spread, like a forest fire. And that's what happens. Bigotry and hate are spreading like mad in this country and abroad. X is having the same effect in Britain and in Italy and all over the world.
And also, you don't see, it's just so kind of binary or kind of surface. What's happening is there's a difference between the Palisades fire and who's affected and the Easton fire and who's affected. There are a lot of working class families who have lost their homes.
In the Easton fire?
Yes, in Altadena and otherwise. And there are, I mean, everything is horrific, but there's subtle differences and you see different stories coming out of each community. But online, it's just California burns. There's this sense of, there's a lack of granularity and nuance and, of course, empathy.
Heather, let me just ask you, as an LA native almost, what's the
Almost.
future of big cities that are subjected regularly to natural disasters that are getting worse and worse and worse? In other words, you can't even insure
I
a
know.
house in Los Angeles anymore. And in the future, it's going to be even harder. And if you can't insure, you can't get a mortgage. And if you can't get a mortgage, you can't buy. And if you can't buy, the housing stock, which is already in trouble, is in greater trouble. I mean, what can we say about the future of these places in America?
Well, I think we have to be wary about the inequality that's going to be exacerbated by this, clearly. I mean, if you have cash to buy a house, good on you. Go ahead and buy a house. Everyone else, I don't know what you're going to do. And also, of course, when you're on these coasts, I mean, now that all this scorched earth is happening, then the rain's going to come, then the mudslides are going to come. I mean, this is serious.
And the floods.
Yeah.
And you have also on the East Coast hurricanes.
Right.
I mean, if this country doesn't really respond in a very, very big way
Right.
to climate change, and yet we have a president coming on board who thinks he's
that
already
part.
president,
I know,
who
that
thinks
part.
climate change is a hoax, who wants to get rid of windmills. I mean, he's saying windmills kill whales. Did you hear that?
yes.
I mean, that news conference on Tuesday was nuts. He is out of his mind. And yet we are suffering all sorts and will probably suffer more natural disasters.
But we got to build up the public coffers in terms of having the funds to fund fire departments and fund everyone else. You have to do it at the local level. You have to do it at the state level. I mean, the federal level, I don't even want to talk about. But can't stop.
If I can just, 800 prisoners. 800 prisoners are now helping to battle those fires in Los Angeles. They are making as little as $5.80 an hour. And these are prisoners,
Per
right?
day, I
I
think.
think it's $5 a day.
Is that right? I thought it was $5.80 an hour. $5.80 a day.
It's quite low.
And now I want you to think, keep that in your mind. All these prisoners who are fighting fires, 800 of them, and you have Donald Trump, who was convicted on 34 counts of felonies in New York, and he was just released. I mean, he did no prison, no fine, no penalty, nothing.
Get out of jail free card?
I mean, is this what happened? Don't we have something called the rule of law? Don't we have something that is about equal justice?
Yeah, I didn't even know there was such a thing as an unconditional discharge that could. I mean, let alone to have it apply to someone who has as many charges on the books as this. It's crazy.
The majestic equality of the law, punishing rich and poor alike for sleeping under bridges and stealing loaves of bread. Remember that?
No.
Anatole France.
Oh,
You didn't study Anatole France?
No. God, the lacking education.
Well,
Done,
but it's
Bob.
no, but it is plain for everybody to see.
But this is the first president to go to office as a convicted felon.
Yes, and he's going to talk about that a lot, right?
Oh, he's going to lead with
gonna
it at
boast
every
it.
Mar-a-Lago.
In the
That's
week
right.
before he's inaugurated.
And
as
what
well.
are the Democrats?
My
The
goodness.
Democrats are not going to say anything. Why don't the Democrats say that? Why is there no Democratic leadership saying, okay, yes, he's going, and yes, we respect the office of the president. He obviously doesn't because he's a convicted felon, and he's going to become our president?
I know. And comparing that to the felons who are working, the prisoners, I should say, who are working sent out to the front of the fire, 800 people.
A week from Monday, Donald Trump takes office again. Now, there are a lot of people who are listening to us and watching us, who feel very much probably as we all do. I'm making some assumptions about the two of you.
I trust you.
I feel like it's not only an outrage, it's depressing as shit. And I mean, how did this happen? How is it possible?
Well, we ignored the 14th Amendment.
We ignored the 14th Amendment.
That happened.
Twice impeached. He conducted a coup d'etat on the United States, an attempted coup d'etat, and he's still going to be president, and unrestrained. In fact, worse than before. All of the signs show that he is going to be far worse than he was
Even
before.
just his press conference the other week, he was worse than he ever has been. But we're going to I keep looking down to see if we've hit rock bottom, but I'm not sure.
No, we
I think
haven't.
we're
He's
still
not
going.
even president
I think
yet.
we're still
I mean,
going.
this is the thing. He's acting as if he's president. He is not even president yet. Joe Biden.
I mean,
He's
there's
still
no one
president.
but Trump. Well, there's Musk, but I mean, Joe Biden, haven't heard from. I mean, yes, at President Carter's funeral, it was nice to see all the people there. But I mean, Kamala Harris, you don't hear from, and even J.D. Vance, I mean, it's just the Trump show.
And
with a side
by the
of
way,
Musk.
you mentioned Jimmy Carter, whom I work for. Talk about a man of character and decency
And morals.
and morals.
It's quite a contrast. To
I mean,
see.
what an unbelievable contrast to the person who's just about to become president. Could you, if you lined up every president or even every human being on the earth, Jimmy Carter would be, in terms of decency to indecency, Jimmy Carter would be on the decency end, and indecency, guess who?
I mean, I think he would just tumble off the side. He wouldn't even make it. Outlier is an understatement. It would just.
And you've got everybody who is, already kind of kissing his derriere.
Oh, here we go. This is it.
No, but
the oligarchy.
That's what oligarchy is all about. You have these strong men, and then everybody else around them just does everything, genuflect.
Yep, that's
He was
it.
bragging about that this week. He was saying, oh, yeah, Bill Gates came over and Elon Musk came over and Jeff Bezos came over. Everyone came over.
And they came over, and they did more than come over. They actually changed their algorithms. I mean, look at what Zuckerberg did.
I know, this week has been incredible. So he has announced new changes to the algorithms, and he is no longer going to
On
require.
Facebook, on
Instagram,
Threads,
on
Meta
Threads.
products.
It's all the Meta platforms. No longer requiring third-party fact-checking. Michael, tell us more.
Well, yeah. So he's replacing third-party fact-checking with a system similar to what X has, which is community notes, which are driven by individuals on a volunteer basis.
Which
is just anybody.
Community notes. I mean, what Elon Musk did with community notes during the election campaign of 2024, when Elon Musk is putting out lie after lie against Kamala Harris and for Trump, there's no community notes. I mean, no community notes.
The notes themselves are capable of driving misinformation. Surprise. And not only that, he's also rolling back a lot of their policies on hateful conduct on these Meta platforms. So there are things I won't say on this podcast that you are fully capable of saying on Meta platforms from this point forward, things that are not only offensive, but, potentially dangerous.
So I'll do some. I'll say some. But I'll say
No, wait a minute. I'll say it about them,
Right.
the oligarchy. But was there new training manual?
Well, yeah, they had a bunch of these examples in their new training materials for Meta employees. And to the degree that some of the Meta employees looked at that and said, no, I'm not working here anymore, because it's not just genuflecting or deference to Trump. I mean, it's a complete surrender to the far right, essentially. And to say, we're going to let not just misinformation, but hate spread on these platforms without restraint.
So some rated G examples are women are allowed to be called property, and transgender people are allowed to be called freaks.
And mentally ill, among other things.
I mean, this is truly what's on there, and that's the beginning.
This is the beginning. This is hate and bigotry, and it's licensed hate and bigotry.
Well, it's free speech, Bob. I don't know.
And it's baloney's free speech.
I know.
I mean, let's be very clear about this. It's not as if it's two sides to, on here, one side is hate and bigotry and lies, and over here is decency. And so we're going to say, oh, well, I don't know. I own these big platforms. I'm not sure. Hate, lies, and bigotry and decency. Well, I think I'll do free speech, hate, lies, and bigotry. That is outrageous that some individuals called Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, those individuals should have the power to decide what information people actually get and whether disgusting,
when
horrible.
they've gobbled up all of the big platforms, right? This is significant. We're looking at Twitter, the Washington Post, all the Meta platforms. This is a lot of where people get their info. Less so the Washington Post. Sorry, Jeff Bezos.
And I'll add as well, I mean, just having been on X a lot, partly because I get to work with you both, and just in my own time, it's amazing to see just the tone and how it's changed over the last 2 years. And even just the frequency of far right and nationalist and xenophobic and fascist content that regularly appears in people's feeds without them asking for it. And I think that that's the other concern. You're normalizing a bunch of this stuff. It's not just that the speech itself is bad, but you're introducing the concept of, now teenagers are going to become Francisco Franco aficionados because all of a sudden all of these weirdos are going on X and saying, well, have you thought about, phalangism or fascism? Isn't that exciting? These are ideas that are inherently dangerous to a democracy and to a stable society, right, Bob?
They're not only dangerous to a stable society, and they undermine democracy, and they make it, instead of free speech, it actually is an assault on free speech, because ultimately these voices of hate drown out voices of decency and moderation. And that, how can you conduct a democracy if you can't have decent conversations?
And when the algorithms are pumping certain things, it's not an even playing field.
But see, this is exactly where the oligarchy comes in. I mean, people don't realize, or haven't until now, maybe they will start realizing it, that there is a very small number of people with huge amounts of money. I mean, Elon Musk is the richest person in the world, and Jeff Bezos is the second richest person in the world. And you have people like that, and Zuckerberg and others, who have a monopoly on the information we get. And they have turned their money, their fortunes, into political power. That's what an oligarchy is.
That's it.
Trump is their vehicle. Trump is their kind of their way in, their vehicle for taking more and more and more power.
And the loop just goes between them. So Trump gets into office after Elon helps him with all his money, and then Jeff Bezos says, congratulations, I'll give to your inauguration fund. And how about we pay on Amazon Prime Melania $40 million for her documentary? And then how about I stream for free the inauguration on Amazon Prime for a first time ever, Mr. Trump?
So they're competing for his goodwill, and they're competing to see who can kiss his backside more effectively. And who is the loser here? The loser is the public.
But the sycophancy. Did I say that right?
Sycophancy.
Sycophancy.
They're sycophants.
But they're
sycophants.
Yeah, it's astronomical. I mean, it's so blatant.
But this is the essence of oligarchic power. In other words, Trump is their front man, but they are actually in power. I mean, Elon Musk puts a $250 million to get Trump elected. What kind of a country are we? What kind of a democracy is this, where $250 million from the richest person in the world can get somebody elected, and then that richest person in the world becomes the head of the Department of Efficiency and can go through and make recommendations to get rid of programs that people really desperately need?
And Zuckerberg just put Dana White, right? Onto
the
the board.
Wrestling. Yeah.
Yes, who is very close with Trump, and then he announces this video to the world about how he's rolling everything back in favor of free speech with a almost $1 million watch on his arm.
And taking the few people left who are in charge of moderation, the very few, and taking them and moving them from California, where he says they're going to be biased because California is much too liberal, and putting them in Texas. I mean,
which is a Musk move.
Well, it's just the whole thing. You've got to connect the dots. People have got to see what is actually happening here. The power move, the power elite has gone. The only good that can come out of any of this is that the American public actually begins to see what's happening, because much of this has been hidden before, and now it's not hidden.
It's so blatant.
It's blatant.
Yep.
It's absolutely out in the open, and I think that's. People ask me sometimes, is there a silver lining here? Do I have any hope going into 1 week from darkness, or the darkness of the Trump administration? And I say yes.
Good. Tell us more.
Well, it's because when you see the oligarchy in action, when you actually press the reveal code and everybody sees the power that has
And
been
the
taken
money.
and is in control in the hands of a few multi-billionaires, it is outrageous. This country doesn't want aristocracy. We were founded in a revolt against, centralized monarchical power. People will see it, and my hope and expectation is that it's like lancing a boil.
Lovely image.
Right.
Do you like that? I mean, you
No, but
can't
I
ignore
appreciate
it
it.
because the boil gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, certainly.
I mean, I have been involved in Democratic administrations, and those Democratic administrations are better than the Republican administrations, but the Democratic administrations still have allowed inequality to widen and more corruption and legalized bribery and all of these things to happen, and payoffs to big corporations and the bailouts of big banks under Democratic administrations. So didn't we finally need to see this all for what it is? And
Well,
isn't
we
it?
are front row seats.
Well, people are going to get hurt in the process, and that's what
Big
concerns
time.
me. Yeah.
Big time. You've said this before too, and I think it's important. It's not that rich people are inherently bad. It's not that the system isn't always going to have some people have more than other people. But the abuse of that much money is where the problem lies.
It's turning the money into political power. That's where the abuse is. We cannot have, this is the old chestnut, the old quote from Louis Brandeis, the great jurist. We have a choice. America has a choice. We can either have great wealth in the hands of a few, or we can have a democracy. But we can't have both.
I know.
And we are now turning that corner and seeing and that reveal that we can't have both.
And Trump, it's unprecedented that he is taking office before he's taking office. Is it surprising? No. But here we have him doing these press conferences, getting all this ridiculousness out there, all these billionaires just chomping at the bit to gain his favor. And I think it was important this week, I sat and watched his press conference. It was horrible. I don't know why I had that on the television for 45 minutes.
He's out of his mind.
He's out of his mind. And so can we talk a little bit about how he's taking over not just America, but the world? So they're
genuflecting.
Yeah.
Much of the rest of the world is genuflecting. The leaders
Right.
of the rest of the world are thinking, oh my gosh, we have to deal with this crazy man.
I know.
So how do we deal with him?
But so hopefully some won't. Greenland, we'll have to see what happens. Canada, Panama. These were places that he was disparaging. He was disparaging America's record in terms of, foreign relations with these
He wants
countries.
to take over Greenland.
And he's going to come in and usurp.
The Danes. He doesn't know about the Danes. Let me just tell you.
Tell us about the Danes.
You don't want to fool around with the Danes.
No.
We know that from Hamlet.
Right.
And
exactly.
the Vikings.
The Danes
Well,
when they get angry, who knows?
But isn't this, just to connect back to the last point, one of the many distractions that the Trump administration presumably has, if not pre-planned down the road, will make up some to keep hiding that oligarchic control that you're talking about, right? This is to throw people off balance more than anything. Or is he serious?
That's right. You talk about taking over, annexing Canada, and taking over Greenland, taking over the Panama Canal, renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, and people go, and it's all over the newspapers. Meanwhile, the actual oligarchic takeover of America goes on quietly, and nobody is seeing it. But we do. We see it, and we are going to broadcast it.
We are.
And you see it, too.
But so, it's so interesting to watch it all. This is classic Trump, where he just creates a fog. We've done a video on the fog of Trump. He creates a fog, and he comes in and he does a news conference where he throws so much spaghetti at the wall of mayhem, where it's like they can't get to it quick enough. So what is he? Is he just he always wants the limelight. We know that. But what is he specifically deflecting from this week? Because he's smart at marketing.
Oh, he knows the news cycle. He is deflecting. The biggest threat right now is that he's got some bonkers cabinet choices, and they have to go through the Senate, and they're going through the Senate this week and next week. There are hearings on people like Tulsi Gabbard.
And presumably the Senate Republicans are going to try and rush those as quickly as they can so people don't notice, too.
Yes,
right?
and what the Democrats ought to do, if they were Democrats, if they really cared to be the opposition party, is they would scream bloody murder about Kash Patel and what the things that he has said, that the nominee for the head of the FBI, what he has said about getting Trump's enemies, and what he has said about the media.
And Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And by the way, there could be, it's possible, please God no, another pandemic of some sort. What do we do when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is there saying, oh no, we can't have vaccines? That's what Trump wants to avoid. He wants to get these people through, and so he's going to talk about taking over Greenland. I mean, what a wonderful, crazy idea to deflect attention from his actual administrative picks.
And the sad part is, even if it is just a distraction, it's also still empowering other far-right leaders around the world to make similar claims and say even more outrageous things and creating mini Trumps all over the globe, essentially.
I think that's an important point, Michael. Look at South Korea. I mean, this South Korean president, or former president, who declared martial law, and the legislature said you can't do that. That is illegal, unconstitutional. He was impeached, and he says, "No, I'm not leaving."
Yeah.
The election was stolen, and his supporters are surrounding his palace or his enclave, and they're saying, "No, you can't take him away."
And they're saying, "Stop the steal." They're literally
Stop the
borrowing
steal.
exact phrases from
In fact,
Trump.
they're using they're even in English. His supporters are putting up placards in English, "Stop the steal."
And I saw today that they were also, if you want to talk about old authoritarian movements, coming back either because of social media or just this new rise in the far right, there are people dressing up as, police officers from, when South Korea was an authoritarian state back in the 1970s and 80s and saying, we're going to protect the president. It's just, you're seeing versions of that everywhere, whether it's Brazil, South Korea, all over Europe, and it's terrifying.
And you have people, I don't want to devote more time to Musk, but Musk is supporting the right-wing neo-Nazi group in Germany.
Yeah, he hosted the leader on an X space just this week, too.
Yep.
Yeah, and the election is coming up in a few weeks in Germany, and he is supporting the right-wing head of Italy, and he is making life very difficult for the
for
Prime
Starmer in the
Minister
UK, yeah.
in the UK, and he is supporting. I mean, he is. This is why Trump and Musk need each other. Why it's really we ought to be talking about Trusk or Mump, right?
Yeah. I want to be talking about Trusk and Mump.
Trusk and Mump,
desperately.
because it's that they're becoming the same person. They are dependent. They're codependent on each other.
Am I allowed to be talking about this? Maybe not. I have gotten to read an advanced copy of your upcoming book, Coming Up Short.
Wait a minute. Coming up short? Is that a double entendre?
Of course it is. A generational memoir. And so, but you talk so much about this, and the idea of multiple Trumps is terrifying. And you take us through the history and your history and where we've gone and through World War II and how did we get to where we are today. It's been so fun to read.
Well, you're going to get acknowledgement for reading it and
it.
for giving me very good feedback.
Well,
and
thank you.
It's not coming out till August.
Okay, back to school.
And August is, nothing happens in August.
No.
That's
Also,
why
it's eons
Not
away.
at all.
the publishers said, well, since nothing's happening in August, why not put out your book in August?
Yeah, but so you've been, it feels like, and then...
Oh, well, we have something to share with the audience as well, and yourself, because you appeared on page 1 of the New York Times this week. Big surprise. With and for those of us listening, the headline on this is How the Democrats Lost the Working Class Vote. And the first few paragraphs describe a speech by one former Secretary of Labor. They note the very liberal Labor Secretary.
Very liberal?
Who ventured into hostile territory to issue a prophetic warning. And it talks about the speech that you gave about how we were becoming a two-tiered society. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Remind our audience?
Well, I'll try to.
Well, here,
Is
can.
it
You were
here?
speaking
Is
to
it
the
quoted?
Democratic Leadership Council.
Okay. Today, what is it? What did I say? Oh, yes, we're becoming a two-tiered society with a few winners and a larger group of Americans left behind, whose anger and whose disillusionment is easily manipulated.
Prescient.
Today, the targets of that rage are immigrants. This is 1994.
I know.
Today, the targets of that rage are immigrants and welfare mothers and government officials and gays and an ill-defined counterculture. But as the middle class continues to erode, who will be the targets tomorrow? It took me 30 years
To have someone read it, to
to
hear it.
hear it.
No, but, and you also called this working class, the anxious class.
The anxious class. By the way, does anybody actually read the
No.
paper version
I
of
have
the
to
New York
admit,
Times?
I did have to go out of my way to find a physical paper of the Times as a digital native.
I saw it on my laptop,
but
though.
it is nice to hold, I will admit.
There is something about, I am still a newspaper person.
Well, you
I
can
mean,
use it to,
you
fill-
open the paper like this. Anybody?
yeah, and you snap it.
No, you take sections out.
Oh, yeah.
First thing,
And then
you open it up like
Then
this.
you snap it.
and
This is
then
some
you
good
just-
ASMR for the people
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then you use it to,
and if you're on
Put
the
in
subway,
packages.
if you're on the subway in New York,
yeah. This is
go
great
like
for
this.
people listening.
this is very good. See?
Yeah, we're getting all the crunches in.
I smell it.
And you
It
can
does
smell,
have
and you
smell
can
it.
get
Smell.
ink all over your
Yeah.
fingers.
And you can wrap your French fries
This is
in
the way we used to absorb news.
Absorbed, literally.
Well, then that kind of raises a question to me because there were this past week a lot of centrist pundits or traditionally centrist pundits coming out and making a similar case that while the Democratic Party should be embracing populism all of a sudden, changing their tune, kind of interesting. And the fact that this is now on the front page of the New York Times, what
But
does
listen,
that mean?
there really are two kinds of populism. The right wing, the Trumpists, Trumpers, have been embracing for years cultural populism. And that means going after the symbols of elitism, many of them made up. Transgender people. You go after them, or go after immigrants, go after the deep state, go after all sorts of symbols that people can get riled up against. But the alternative to cultural populism is real, and that's economic populism. That's going after the Musks and the people who abuse their wealth and turn it into political power. That's what's happening in this country. And this is why I am optimistic, just to repeat myself, that as we descend into the horrors of the Trump administration, people will actually see how important economic populism is. Democrats will find their voice. And if they don't, we'll have another party that will replace them and find its voice.
But it's hard because part of cultural populism is there's a faux economic populism hidden in it that's convincing for some people. So you really got to tease out if you're doing the real economic populism.
Yes,
It's a
got to
hard
go after the
messaging
big.
game.
You've got to go after big money in politics. You've got to go after the ways big corporations are getting subsidized and changing the rules of the game. You've got to go after how wealthy people are dodging taxes. You've actually got to look at the system in detail and see how the rules of that system have been warped and changed by those in power with a lot of money.
One thing that has made me feel both negative and positive, which is a lot these days.
It's like a magnet.
I
You're
know.
just going around.
I am.
Yes.
There's a lot of spinning.
Yeah.
But these numbers, and there have been a couple different numbers, but basically the people that there is not a MAGA mandate. This is not Trump did not win by a huge landslide. I have to believe that America has not all gone MAGA. And when you look at the numbers, and the farther we get from the election, we get more and more data, right? That millions of people, and some people have said it's up to 19 million, and some people say it's closer to 7 or 8 million, but people who voted for Joe Biden 4 years ago stayed home and didn't vote for Kamala Harris. So if we're talking 7 million of them, right, and Trump won by under 3 million votes, it's important to remember that those people who sat home, I can only imagine, don't all of a sudden have MAGA hats on and aren't all of a sudden saying, I've switched my views on abortion.
This is a very important point.
Right. There's a disconnect.
And well, it's important that people in this country understand. If they are people who don't like hate, don't like bigotry, don't like some of the stuff that the Trumpism actually represents, and certainly don't like the policies that are associated with it, they're not alone. They are the majority of Americans. The fact that a majority of voters went for Trump doesn't mean a majority of Americans are MAGAs.
Right.
In fact, a majority of Americans probably, I doubt they are. This is why, again, when people see what we are up against in terms of the oligarchy, they will actually take action. They will say in 2026, we're going to take back both chambers of Congress. In 2028, we're going to have a president that cares about working people and the common good. And we are going to get away from these crazy, bigoted notions.
Right. And may we and the most marginalized people survive in the interim.
Well, that's the issue. That, to me, protecting the vulnerable over the next few years is critically important. It's all our responsibilities. Listen, Heather, Michael, thank you. Jordan Outport, thank you.
Thanks,
over
Jordan.
there. And all of you, we are very close to a week until the darkness comes. In fact, for many of us, it's already coming. Those of you in Los Angeles are not only our hearts and sympathies are with you, we know many of you, and we really hope desperately that you do okay, that you survive, that your houses, your families, your loved ones, your everything about home maintains itself to the extent possible. If you've escaped from there, when you come back, I hope it's recognizable. And if there's anything the rest of the country can do, I hope we do it, because this is a time when we all need to come together and recognize that we are all in it together. So on that note of sadness, see you next week.